Chapter 1074. Gu Xingyin and Shirlei walked into the forest. After coming out of the mountain village, Shirlei did not speak, which made Gu Xingyin feel a little strange. She turned her head and found that he had been looking at her with sparkling eyes. Gu Xingyin was a little amused. She asked, "Why are you looking at me like that?" Shirlei's face suddenly turned red when he was caught peeping at her. He stammered, "No, nothing. I was just thinking about what Luan said just now. I think it's very novel and reasonable." Such words were probably the most honest and sincere praise from a man living in the mountains. Gu Xingyin's heart skipped a beat. She wanted to tease him. "Oh, then tell me, what's the reason?" Shirlei's face turned even redder when he heard this. He didn't know what the reason was. He simply felt that Luan was different from the women in the mountain village. This difference was not only referring to her rare beauty and elegant behavior, but also to what she did and what she said. Shirlei couldn't explain it, but he just felt that Luan was different from others. He shook his head and said, "I can't explain it." Then he looked at Gu Xingyin and said seriously, "But I just think what Luan said is very reasonable. If what she said didn't make sense, why couldn't those people in the mountain village refute her words?" Shirlei's ears were red as he thought about it. Gu Xingyin looked at his honest appearance and his heart skipped a beat. Just as he was about to say something, his ears twitched. Shirlei also seemed to have noticed something. He was about to say, "There's prey coming." Then he saw the woman beside him turn her left hand, and the longbow on her back was already in her hand. She neatly nocked an arrow with her right hand. Almost at the same time, the arrow flew out like lightning in a certain direction. In the dense forest where the branches and leaves were trembling, there was the scream of an animal. They rushed over and saw that the arrow that Gu Xingyin had just shot was firmly stuck in a pheasant. The pheasant was not completely dead. Half of its body was stained with blood, and its body was still twitching and struggling. Gu Xingyin saw this and stepped forward to lift the pheasant up. She neatly twisted its neck and pulled the arrow out. Then she turned around and met Shirlei's dumbfounded gaze. "What's wrong? Are you frightened by me?" she asked. Shirlei came back to his senses and looked at the pheasant in Gu Xingyin's hand. He still couldn't believe it. No, I just didn't expect. Luan, you are really amazing." Shirlei looked at Gu Xingyin, his eyes. How could there be a woman like Luan in this world? She was so beautiful, she could reason, she knew martial arts, and she was so good at archery. Shirlei lowered his head and thought about it carefully. Compared to Luan, he was a grown man, but he couldn't compare to her at all. As he thought of this, he felt dejected again. People in the mountains were simple and honest, and didn't know how to hide their thoughts. He felt dejected and his face showed a sense of loss. Gu Xingyin looked at him, and it wasn't difficult to guess what he was thinking. She comforted him. "Although I don't remember anything, look at my martial arts and archery. I must have hired a famous teacher to teach me. You relied completely on your talent. The two can't be compared." Although Shirlei felt that Luan's words were a bit awkward, he could still hear that she was comforting him. Luan was really a very good woman, he thought. Chapter 1075. Gu Xingyin looked at Shirlei, who had everything written on his face, and only felt that it was very interesting. She had seen his domineering, cold, and arrogant look many times, but this time, she felt that it was very fresh. It was also the easiest to get along with such a person. Shirlei put the pheasant that Gu Xingyin had caught into the basket on his back, and the two of them continued to walk forward. Hunters relied on this forest to make a living, and also relied on the weather to make a living. Now was a good time, of course, they had to store more food, otherwise, when the season of rain and snow came, life would not be easy. Then Gu Xingyin saw that she had just praised Shirlei's talent. When he found the wild beast, Shirlei's face lit up. This forest was closer to the mountain village, and it was not deep into the forest, so it was rare to encounter such a large wild beast. But it was too dangerous deep in the mountains, and only when the village was really short of food would a few strong hunters form a team and go further into the mountains to search for food. Of course, Shirlei would not go to such a dangerous place with Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin looked at the wild beast carefully a few times, and found that she did not recognize it. It looked similar to the wild boar in her impression, but it did not have many spikes on its body like the wild boar. The moment she found the wild beast, Gu Xingyin shot the arrow in her hand. But she did not know what material the wild beast's fur was made of, and even with her strength, the arrow could not penetrate it. Even if it had something to do with the fact that Shirley's self-made arrow was not sharp enough. The wild beast's fur was also stronger than any animal that Gu Xingyin had seen before. Then, when Gu Xingyin was still thinking of a way to get rid of this prey, Shirley had already put down the bow in his hand and pounced on it. Gu Xingyin was shocked. She knew that Shirley only had brute strength, and was afraid that he would get hurt on impulse. Then she saw a scene that made her eyes widen uncontrollably. Shirley actually used the strength of his two hands to grab the wild beast's front and back legs, and lifted it up. Gu Xingyin. She silently glanced at the beast. It seemed to be at least 500 or 600 pounds. Looking at Shirley's appearance again, he couldn't see the slightest bit of reluctance on his face when he lifted the beast. After that, she watched as Shirley exerted force with both hands, and threw the wild beast out. The wild beast flew out and crashed into a tree, breaking a tree that was about 10 inches wide. The beast let out a sound similar to an anguished wail. Its movements were somewhat sluggish as it got up and ran towards the forest. Obviously, it understood that its opponent was not a simple character, and planned to escape. But now that he finally saw such a big prey, how could Shirley let it escape? His eyes were burning with fighting spirit as he chased after the wild beast. An injured beast was also a hunter with great strength. Gu Xingyin didn't even need to look to guess the outcome. She watched as Shirley tied up the beast with a rope and dragged it on the ground. The corner of the beast's mouth was full of blood, and it was no longer breathing. Alwan. Shirley smiled, revealing his white teeth. We have a great harvest today. We can go back early. It was indeed a great harvest. Gu Xingyin glanced at the huge beast and estimated that according to their appetite, if they ate it every day, it would be enough to last them for at least 2 months. Chapter 1076. When the two of them dragged the beast back, they attracted a crowd of onlookers in the village. Aunt Zhou seemed to have forgotten what happened in the morning. She looked at the big beast in Shirley's hand enviously. She opened her mouth and said, "Aya, let me see. What did this big stone bring back? It's so big. It must be bigger than dumb insect, right? I'm afraid that the two of you can't finish this meat, right? Aya, our man hasn't come back today. I don't know if he can get enough food for our family today." Did she mean that she wanted a share of the soup? However, when Shirley heard this, he immediately laughed. "Aunt Zhou, it just so happens that I can't finish this thing." "Why don't?" Gu Xingyin saw the joy in Aunt Zhou's eyes. She faintly continued the conversation. "Why don't we dry and marinate the meat? It can be stored for a long time. We can eat it slowly." Aunt Zhou's smile suddenly froze on her face. Shirley looked at Gu Xingyin with some confusion. He didn't understand why she suddenly spoke. However, when she said this, Shirley swallowed back the words that he wanted to say. Could it be that Alwan liked to eat this beast's meat? He thought about it. Since Alwan liked it, then he wouldn't share it with Aunt Zhou's family. What if Alwan didn't have enough to eat? "Let's go back," Gu Xingyin said to Shirley. "I'm a little tired today." When he heard Gu Xingyin say that she was tired, Shirley didn't care about anything else. He hurriedly asked nervously, "Tired? Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere? Does the wound still hurt? Let's go back quickly." The two of them talked to each other like this and forgot about First Aunt Zhou. First Aunt Zhou's fat face was very interesting. Her lips trembled, and she turned around to see Xiao looking at them from the gate. She finally scolded with a trembling voice. "Shameless lowly wench. A loser who lives off a woman. I think you can only rely on men to support you in the future." Xiao silently listened to this woman's abuse. After these few days, she was used to this woman. As long as this woman was unhappy, she would come back and use her as a punching bag. Anyway, in her eyes, her daughter was born to collect debts, wasn't she? Axio also knew who she really wanted to scold. However, she didn't dare to scold that person, so she could only use herself to scold him indirectly. Why was it that even though he had transmigrated, he was still the one being oppressed and bullied? Axia didn't believe it. She didn't believe that she had transmigrated just to live a hard life in a mountain village. She also did not believe that she would live in such a small village for the rest of her life, marry an illiterate mountain man in a few years, and then live in such a small place for the rest of her life. She used to think that she could rely on Chu Fei-Luan to get out, but Chu Fei-Luan didn't even want to talk to her. In that case, he could only think of a way himself. She slowly lowered her eyes. Eldest Aunt Zhou got angry when she saw her like this. Although her daughter had been more obedient recently, her personality had become more and more gloomy. Finally, she had a sullen face. No one knew what she was thinking about. It made people panic when they saw her. Why are you standing here like a block of wood? Have you washed the clothes at home? Have you peeled the corn in the yard? Do you really think you're a female bodhisattva? As long as you sit and don't do any work, the house doesn't raise idle people. Chapter 1077. Does Alwan like to eat wild beast meat? Shirley asked. Gu Xingyin turned her head strangely. She didn't understand why he asked this question. Looking at her expression, Shirley knew that he was probably wrong. He explained embarrassedly. When I heard you say that, I thought you liked to eat this meat very much. Gu Xingyin connected the dots and understood what Shirley meant. He thought that she liked to eat this wild beast meat, so he didn't want her to share it with others? Gu Xingyin. No, I've never seen such a wild beast. Shirley didn't understand. If that's the case, why? At this moment, the two of them had returned to Shirley's yard. Shirley put down the game in his hand. Gu Xingyin said lightly, nothing. I just feel that it's a waste to give the game you worked so hard to catch to someone like that. Shirley turned his head to look at her. Gu Xingyin had been here for more than a month, but she had never seen Aunt Zhou take out anything from home to give Shirley. Even if he was injured, Shirley would ask Aunt Zhang, who was far away from home, for help, not Aunt Zhou, who was just a fence away. This showed that in Shirley's heart, he knew who would really help him. Today, listening to the conversation between Aunt Zhou and Shirley, and hearing Aunt Zhou's familiar tone, Gu Xingyin knew that she had done this kind of thing often. And looking at Shirley's appearance, he had probably never refused her. But Gu Xingyin didn't see any gratitude to Shirley from Aunt Zhou. For some people, if you were good to them, they wouldn't be able to return the same kindness. On the contrary, you would raise their hearts and make them want to bite a bigger piece of meat from you all the time. Aunt Zhou was such a person. Gu Xingyin always kept a respectful distance from such people. However, Shirley suddenly laughed. Gu Xingyin looked at him inexplicably. She did not understand what was wrong with this man all of a sudden. Shirley looked at her and said with a smile. Actually, I know what Alwan said. I know what kind of person Aunt Zhou is. I don't expect her to remember my good deeds and help me when there's a problem. It's just that I feel that I'm still young and strong. I can't finish all these things anyway. Gu Xingyin said, then clean it up and send it to Auntie Zhang and Uncle Wang at the entrance of the village. The smile on Shirley's face never faded. Okay. The few families that Alwan mentioned would always remember to leave a portion for him whenever they had something. Shirley was very happy. Alwan was speaking up for him. She was thinking for him. Did this mean that he had some status in her heart? After all, if she really didn't care, she wouldn't be afraid of being taken advantage of, nor would she care about how she dealt with her own things. Gu Xingyin watched Shirley slaughter the prey, wash it, cut the meat into large pieces, strung it with a straw rope and dried it in the yard. Then he carried a basket with some meat in it, and went to deliver things to people. Before he left, he had already cleaned the yard, and was especially careful to move out a bench for Gu Xingyin, so that she could lie down and bask in the sun for a while. However, Gu Xingyin didn't enjoy the spring sunshine for long before an unexpected guest came to the yard. Today's night watch ends at 8 o'clock. See you in the morning. Have a good weekend, everyone. Chapter 1078. Miss Alwan. The person who came was a Xiao, whom she had not seen for a long time. Gu Xingyin raised her head to look at her. From the looks of it, a Xiao had not been living very well during this period of time. Her originally plump figure had now slimmed down, her face was somewhat haggard, and her eyes were gloomy. She did not even look as lively and cute as before. What's the matter? Mrs. Xiao? The eldest brother of the Shi family is not home. If you want to find him, you can come back later. Gu Xingyin said lazily. A Xiao looked at her with some jealousy. This woman, even if she was plotted against and fell off a cliff, even if she came to such an isolated and poor mountain village, she still lived so freely. Her face was rosy and her eyes were lazy. It was obvious that she was very satisfied with such a life. A Xiao thought maliciously. If this woman knew what kind of life she was supposed to be living, would she still be so free? I came here specially to find you, Miss Ilwan. A Xiao looked at Gu Xingyin and said. Gu Xingyin looked at her. Her meaning was obvious. If you have something to say it quickly. She was clearly standing and Gu Xingyin was half lying down, but A Xiao always felt that the other party was looking down at her. Some people, even if they lost their memories, the pride and reserve engraved in their bones could not be erased. A Xiao considered her words and said, Miss Ilwan, you should know that you don't belong to this place. Look at your clothes and appearance. You should be in a big city, enjoying fine clothes and delicious food, and being served by groups of maidservants. You shouldn't be in a place like this, where you have to personally hunt and do things that a peasant woman would do. After she finished speaking, she looked at Gu Xingyin, waiting for her reaction. Unfortunately, Gu Xingyin did not give her any reaction. She said lazily, Oh, perhaps. I don't remember anything. A Xiao was furious when she heard this. How come she had never heard that the Qingyuan king had such a lazy personality after losing her memories? Wasn't she supposed to be a domineering and cold beauty? She was unhappy in her heart, so her tone naturally carried a hint of disappointment. You're living a leisurely life here, but do you know how many people are looking for you outside? Your family members must be very anxious right now. Don't you think about them? Gu Xingyin's expression didn't even change when she heard this. Thank you for worrying about me, Miss Xiao, but I don't have any memories of the past. Even if I want to go out, I don't know who to look for. It's better to recuperate first. Axiu. How could there be such a stubborn person in this world? But then again, how could a woman like the Green Phoenix King be so easily swayed by the words of others? After talking for a long time, Gu Xingyin didn't move at all. Xiao knew that her first plan had failed, but it didn't matter. She still had a second step. She said, Miss Ilwan, I found a kind of herb today. It's said that it's very effective in treating injuries and clearing blood stasis. Do you want to try it? Gu Xingyin was a little amused. How could a village girl who had never learned medicine know medicine? It seemed that A Xiao really couldn't help it. Chapter 1079. Gu Xingyin was about to refuse when Shirley, who went out to deliver something, came back. Xiao, I watched you grow up. How come I don't know where you learned that medicinal herb? Shirley looked a little bad. He was still carrying an empty basket in his hand. Gu Xingyin looked at it, and saw that there seemed to be a fish jumping around in it. He wondered which family saw him send something over, and gave him a gift in return. Xiao's eyes flashed when she saw Shirley. When she first came to this world, it was not that she did not have thoughts about Shirley. This man was handsome, had a good figure, and a good temper. If he was in the world she came from, he would definitely be the best choice for a good husband. But she finally gave up the idea. No matter what, he was just a mountain village hunter. It was impossible for her to stay in this place. When she went out, she would not be afraid that she could not find a better man. In her heart, she still looked down on people like Shirley who lived in the mountains. Hearing Shirley's words, she retorted with some indignation. I learned it from the doctor at the entrance of the village. Shirley replied to her rudely. I just came back from Uncle Wang and Dr. Li at the entrance of the village. Dr. Li did not tell me that he knew any medicinal herbs that could clear blood and remove blood stasis. His words made Xiao's face turn red and white. Shirley continued. A Xiao, Shi too has watched you grow up. I really don't know what's wrong with you recently. If you don't know something, don't talk nonsense. You can't talk about things that you've drunk. Be careful that Aunt Zhou will scold you again. Xiao saw that the two people did not believe her and heard Shirley mention Aunt Zhou. She knew that her plan was probably hopeless. She went out with a bad face. Shirley saw her leave and said to Gu Xingyin, I always feel that Xiao has been strange recently. If she says anything to you, you must not believe it. Gu Xingyi nodded. Don't worry. She changed the topic. I think that fish is quite fat. Where did it come from? Shirley glanced at it and said with a smile, Auntie Zhang gave me one of the fish her son caught in the river today. Let's have fish soup for lunch today. Gu Xingyin glanced at him. Did you get any gifts from Aunt Zhou's family in return? Shirley looked at her and smiled. I know. You don't look like such a petty person. Their relationship progressed very quickly. He could now speak to Gu Xingyin in such a relaxed tone. Based on Shirley's understanding of Alwan, she obviously didn't care about money and treasures. He didn't know why she was so against Aunt Zhou's family. Gu Xingyin glanced at him. Do you think I care about those pieces of meat? I just feel that since you've worked so hard to hunt this prey, why bother to pay respects to that ingrate? It was fine to say that she was narrow-minded or calculative, but she just didn't want to. Shirley continued to smile. I know. You're doing it for my own good. She clearly cared about him. How could Alwan be so considerate? Shirley thought happily in his heart. Sure enough, there was no woman better than Alwan in this world. The two of them happily drank a pot of fish soup, and the days passed leisurely and leisurely. Gu Xingyin calculated the time. Tianzi's people should find them in half a month. Her memory was about to be restored. Chapter 1080. Gu Xingyin went hunting with Shirley every day and only came back when it was time to eat. When she was at home, Shirley was also there, so Xiao didn't have a chance to look for her again. When the two of them returned to the courtyard, Gu Xingyin paused as soon as she entered the courtyard. She glanced around the entire courtyard without looking for traces. Shirley looked at her in confusion. What's wrong with Alwan? Gu Xingyin withdrew her gaze and said, Nothing. She put down the things in her hands and watched Shirley take the things to the river to wash. System, this courtyard has been tampered with. The system replied. Yes, host, there are a few herbs mixed in with the weeds by the fence. Gu Xingyin walked over and pushed the weeds aside. Sure enough, there were a few palm-sized green grasses growing inside. The grasses didn't look different from the surrounding grasses, but there were some spots growing on the edges of the leaves. Looking at it like this, it looked like ordinary grasses with worms growing on them. But it wasn't worms, it was the grass that originally grew like this. Moreover, Gu Xingyin recognized this herb. It was because she recognized this herb that she was a little curious about where Xiao found it. Poisonous wolf spot, an extremely rare poisonous herb. How poisonous was this herb? Not to mention that it could kill at the sight of blood. It even had a characteristic that the poison could spread through the air. It was fine to encounter it occasionally, but if it grew in the courtyard like now where people had to stay for a long time every day, then within 3 days, the people in the courtyard would have symptoms of dizziness, nausea and drowsiness. If it wasn't discovered and treated in time, it was likely that they would fall into a coma. And if it was directly taken by mouth, within 2 hours, the person's body would be covered with red spots, itching incessantly, and die of the poison. Gu Xingyin stared at the poisonous wolf spot for a while, then silently covered it with the weeds again. The next day, when she went hunting, she silently picked a few herbs from a place. She knew that there would be amaranth grass that could cure the poisonous wolf spot's poison. Shirley looked at the thing in her hand and felt a little strange. Why did you pick 2 stalks of grass? Gu Xingyin removed the soil from the roots and put the amaranth into the basket on her back. I recognize this. It's good for your health. It's easy for people to fall sick during this season. Let's boil this later tonight. We'll drink a bowl each. Shirley was silent for a moment. He lowered his head and asked, Alwan, during this period of time, I see that you are remembering more and more things. Are you about to remember the past? Gu Xingyin didn't understand the meaning behind his words. She nodded and said, I do remember a lot of things. I also know how to use some of the things I saw. However, I still can't remember the key things. I think it will take some time. Shirley replied with an "oh" to show that he understood and did not say anything. He should be happy. He had long known that Alwan was not from this place. She would leave this place one day, wouldn't she? Hearing the news that she was slowly recovering her memories. Why was he not only unhappy, but also a little sad? It was probably because he was afraid that she would leave after remembering everything. She would leave this mountain village and return to her big city. He didn't know if Alwan would still remember him in the future. Chapter 1081. Shirley tried his best to convince himself not to have such selfish thoughts. But he couldn't hold it in. Gu Xingyin looked at him, who was hanging his head and looking downcast, like a big dog that desperately needed its owner's comfort. Gu Xingyin silently resisted the urge to pinch his furry head. This man, why was he like a child, throwing a tantrum at the slightest disagreement? Gu Xingyin thought to herself in distress. Sigh. It seemed that she would have to teach him a good lesson in the future, so that he could be tough. Otherwise, it would be fine if he stayed in this mountain village, but when he went to Tianzhe capital in the future, wouldn't he be played to death by those scheming nobles? She only asked with a puzzled expression. Big brother Shir, what's wrong? Shirley had been walking silently with his head lowered, but when he heard Gu Xingyin's words, he suddenly raised his head. He stared closely at Gu Xingyin's face, his heart filled with all kinds of thoughts. He wanted to say those unspeakable thoughts that were hidden in the deepest part of his heart, but he didn't dare to. He was afraid that she would despise him and scold him for being a toad lusting after a swan's flesh. But he couldn't help it. Now there were only the two of them, in this dense forest where there were no other people. In her eyes, there was only him. Shirley's lips moved, but in the end he still said what was on his mind. I was thinking that after Alwan regains her memories, we will leave this place. I can't bear to. After he said this, he quickly lowered his head as if he was hiding from something. He didn't dare to look at Gu Xingyin's expression, and he didn't dare to listen to what she was going to say next. But his heart was beating so fast, and his ears were pricked up uncontrollably, waiting for the other party's reaction. Gu Xingyin was stunned for a moment, as if she didn't expect him to say such words. In her heart, after she regained her memories, she would definitely leave this place. And Shirley would definitely leave this place with her. She had thought too much, and had never considered whether Shirley would be willing to leave the big mountain where he grew up, and follow her to a completely foreign place. Gu Xingyin felt as if a basin of ice water had melted in her heart. Her mind cleared up. Her voice also turned cold. So Big Brother sure doesn't intend to leave with me? Shirley raised his head in astonishment. Huh. Seeing him like this, Gu Xingyin was even more certain of her thoughts. It turned out that he had no intention of leaving with her at all. Gu Xingyin's heart was filled with irritation, and he felt very annoyed. However, Shirley's eyes slowly lit up. Did Alwan mean that he could go with her? Why didn't he think of that? Alwan wouldn't stay, but he could leave with her. He didn't have any other requests. He just wanted to stay by her side quietly, watch over her and protect her. When Gu Xingyin raised her head again, she saw that the other party was so excited that his face was red and his eyes were burning as he looked at her. Gu Xingyin. What just happened? Shirley looked at her, and his eyes were bright. Can I leave here with Alwan? When he said this, his tone was filled with uncontrollable excitement, as if the matter of leaving with Alwan was something worth celebrating to him. Gu Xingyin looked at Shirley, and her heart suddenly became clear. It turned out that it was her own thinking that had never been on the same level as the other party. Chapter 1082. She had always thought that it was certain that they would leave together, so she had never thought that they would be separated. As for Shirley, he had always thought that they would be separated when she regained her memories and left. So every time he heard that she was leaving, he would be unhappy and depressed. It turned out that it was not that he was unwilling to leave with her, but that he had never dared to think that he would be able to leave with her. This man, Gu Xingyin looked at the man who was so emotional that his face had turned red. She only felt a slight heartache spreading in her heart. Was he not confident? He felt that his status was low, so he did not dare to dream of anything that did not belong to him. Gu Xingyin, who understood Shirley's thoughts, felt her eyes sting. She raised her head slightly and forced the bitterness back into her eyes. Then she revealed a smile. Of course, I still have to rely on Big Brother Shir to bring me out. Gu Xingyin replied. Shirley looked at Gu Xingyin's smile and blushed. This was the second time he had seen Alwan smile. Unlike the first time, this time, when Alwan smiled, her eyes were filled with him. Her expression was gentle, and her gaze was warm. If a stranger came to this forest and saw Alwan like this, he would definitely think that he was looking at a fairy from the mountains. Shirley felt that Alwan was really beautiful when she smiled. If only she could smile more. When he heard Gu Xingyin's question, Shirley realized that he had unknowingly said what was on his mind. His face turned even redder and he stammered, "No, nothing, I didn't say anything just now." Gu Xingyin, who had heard her words clearly, was speechless. Did she really think that he wouldn't be able to hear her just because she said that? She looked at the uneasy Shirley and sighed inwardly. "Big brother Shir, you are my savior. You don't have to be so restrained in front of me." Every time Shirley faced him, he would become very nervous. Gu Xingyin had noticed this problem from the beginning, but Shirley's attitude had become more and more natural recently. She thought it would get better slowly, but obviously, the remaining half a month was not enough for Shirley to face her freely. If he couldn't face others frankly and generously, he would be at a disadvantage in front of his subordinates in the future. Shirley was a little embarrassed as he clenched the basket in his hand. It wasn't that he didn't want to, but every time he saw Alwan looking at him with those beautiful eyes, he felt his mind go blank. Under such circumstances, it was already very impressive that he could speak and do things normally. Gu Xingyin did not know. She thought that Shirley treated everyone the same way. But that wasn't the case. She didn't know how special she was to this man who was born and raised in the mountains. She was the only one who could change him. Back at home, Gu Xingyin did not waste any time. She boiled the water and made a pot of medicinal soup with those herbs. She and Shirley drank 2 bowls each. Seeing Shirley take the black liquid from her hand and pour it into his mouth without changing his expression, Gu Xingyin felt a warm current in her heart. She still remembered that Shirley had doubted Xiu's words and said that he must be careful when drinking something into his mouth. However, he drank the medicine she handed to him without hesitation. Chapter 1083. Sometimes, a person's attitude towards you could be seen from these little things. After the 2 drank the medicine, Gu Xingyin carefully wrapped the dregs in a clean small bag and tied one to Shirley's waist. Shirley was somewhat puzzled. Gu Xingyin explained, "It seems to be a custom. Wearing this can ward off evil spirits." Shirley smirked and touched the small cloth bag on his waist with his fingers, only to feel warm and comfortable in his heart. No one had ever told him about the custom, and no one would sew such a cloth bag for him. How could Alwan be so good? She was so good that his heart was completely occupied by her day by day, and he could no longer separate himself from her. Gu Xingyin did not notice the change in Shirley's mentality. In order not to arouse Xiu's suspicion, she deliberately added a few kinds of fragrant flower seeds in it, completely covering the smell of the dregs. Gu Xingyin did this to prevent trouble before it happened. Although in theory nothing would happen after drinking the antidote, but after all, the poisonous wolf spot was still in the courtyard. It was better to take some protective measures. The next time was to wait for the bait to take the bait. On the 3rd day, Gu Xingyin estimated that it was almost time. That day, after the 2 finished dinner in the courtyard, Gu Xingyin sent a message to the system. "Follow our original plan." The system flashed a white light, indicating that it understood. Then, Shirley was ready to get up and clean the table, but suddenly felt dizzy. "Why am I so sleepy?" he muttered, and then fell asleep on the table. "Host, don't worry, I can guarantee that he will sleep for a whole night. No matter how big the movement is, he will not wake up." Gu Xingyin nodded and sat quietly on the chair, waiting for Xiu's arrival. Until the system reminded her. "Host," she went out. Gu Xingyin followed Shirley's posture and lay down. A figure appeared outside Shirley's courtyard. It was already night time, and the mountain village was already quiet. The moon was very round, and the clouds in the sky were not as light and cute as they were during the day. At night, they bared their fangs and brandished their claws, revealing their ferocious appearance. The shadow of the intruder was imprinted on the ground, bringing with it a sense of awe-inspiring terror. Xiu seemed to be very vigilant. She patiently waited outside the courtyard for a long time. After making sure that the 2 unconscious people inside would not wake up, She walked in quietly. She walked around the courtyard, and even deliberately went to the side of the fence. Wearing gloves, she plucked the few poisonous wolf spots that she had personally planted, and put them into the pouch tied around her waist. She walked to the table where the two of them were lying on their stomachs. She seemed a little nervous. After staring at Gu Xingyin for a while, she suddenly turned around and went back. Gu Xingyin was wondering what she was going to do, but at the critical moment, the system said, "Host, there is an emergency. I need to leave this world temporarily. It will probably take me one night to come back." Gu Xingyin thought that it was not a problem for her to deal with Axiu alone, so she nodded and let the system leave. There were several valuable antidote pills in her sleeve, which were hidden under Chu Failwan's clothes to save her life at a critical moment. Gu Xingyin was afraid that Axiu would use poison again, so she had already prepared them in advance. Axiu did not leave for a long time. When she came back again, she seemed to be in a very good mood, and even her steps were very light. Gu Xingyin was very curious about what she had done. Axiu did not waste time this time. She pulled Gu Xingyin up from the table, and then put her on her back. She carried the unconscious Gu Xingyin and walked into the deep mountain at night. Chapter 1084. Gu Xingyin leaned on Axiu's back. Axiu was not fast. After all, Axiu was just a weak girl. It was not easy for her to carry Gu Xingyin, who was taller than her. Gu Xingyin looked at the direction Axiu was walking. She seemed to have a clear goal. Obviously, Axiu even knew where the destination was. She must have been planning for this for a long time. After walking for about an hour, Axiu even stopped to rest twice during this time. They finally arrived at the destination. Without the system, Gu Xingyin could not see the environment around her. But when she was put on the ground, she quickly opened her eyes to take a look. It was a cave. It was very clean inside. Obviously, it had been cleaned by someone. There was hay inside, and there was even a cloth bag on the side. It was very likely that there was food inside. This was what Gu Xingyin saw at a glance. Obviously, this was the place Axiu was going to take action. Gu Xingyin also knew how Axiu lived alone in the deep mountains for so long after killing Chu Failwan in the original plot. It turned out that she was prepared. Axiu put Gu Xingyin on the ground. She sat on the side and panted for a long time. She walked for an hour with a person on her back. In addition, she was excited and nervous about what she was going to do. Her heart beat a little faster. Axiu pressed her chest tightly, finally calming her wildly beating heart a little. She turned her eyes and stared at Gu Xingyin's face, who was facing her with her eyes closed. "So beautiful," she murmured. In the world where she came from, technology was very advanced. Those men and women with outstanding looks could even make a living with their looks, and become the idols of many people with good looks. It could be said that ordinary people could see countless beauties through some media. But in Axiu's eyes, those men and women who were called the first beauty by the media and were seen once in 1,000 years could not be compared to this woman. In the situation where the news was blocked and there was no publicity, she became the recognized first beauty in the 5 continents and 12 countries. If one didn't see it with their own eyes, it would be hard to imagine. Her greedy eyes scanned every inch of Gu Xingyin's face. Whether it's the shape of the face, the eyes, the beauty, the nose, the mouth, and even the ears, they are all perfect. Her gaze became more and more heated. "Soon, this will all be mine." Axiu took the bag that she had prepared for a long time and opened it. There were knives that had been polished until they were smooth, and some herbs that emitted a strange smell. She gently picked up a knife. The knife was very thin, and it reflected a pale white light under the faint light of the oil lamp in the cave. "Don't blame me, Qingwuan King. I didn't intend to do that." She seemed to be talking to the unconscious Gu Xingyin, but she also seemed to be talking to herself. "If you simply accept my goodwill and let me leave this place with you, how great would that be? But you didn't want to talk to me at all. I put down my face, put down my reservations, and tried to please you like a dog. Unfortunately, you didn't accept it at all. I was really forced to the point that I had no other choice. If I continue to stay in this place, I will die. But I don't want to die, so I can only wrong you." She moved her body and came to Gu Xingyin's side. Don't worry, I will use your identity to return to Tianzhe and pass down your name as Qing Wan King. Chapter 1085. The silver light was about to fall on Gu Xingyin's face, but it was caught by a white and slender finger. What a sincere monologue, Miss Xiao. A cold and cheerless voice rang out in the empty cave. The temperature in the cave seemed to have dropped because of her voice. Axiu was startled by this sudden sound, and her hand trembled. The saber fell to the ground and made a crisp sound. It caused a clear echo in the cave. Gu Xingyin opened her eyes and stood up from the ground. She gently kicked with the tip of her foot, and the small knife was kicked far away. She leaned over and looked at Xiao, who was still sitting on the ground. Now can you tell me, Miss Xiao, who are you? How could a girl who was born in the mountains and never went out know her identity? And what strange name? King Qing Wan. Xiao's face suddenly turned pale. Chu Fei Wan, you didn't lose your memory. Gu Xingyin gently shook her head. No, I just suddenly remembered. Xiao's face suddenly became dejected. Your Highness, I am just a pitiful girl in the mountains, and I want to borrow your strength to leave this man-eating mountain. As she spoke, she secretly looked at Gu Xingyin's expression. Seeing that the other party's eyes seemed to reveal a trace of compassion, she was overjoyed and slowly stood up. Your Highness, I really don't have any bad intentions. She suddenly waved her sleeve, and a white powder was thrown towards Gu Xingyin. But Xiao didn't even see Gu Xingyin's movements clearly, and the other's figure disappeared in front of her. Then her neck was strangled by the others. Since Miss Xiao knows who I am, then you must also know that I am someone who has been on the battlefield. Gu Xingyin hit several acupoints of Axiu. She couldn't move in an instant, and could only stare at Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin didn't care about her venomous gaze. The first thing this consort wants to tell you is that when you want to kill someone, don't talk so much nonsense. Otherwise, be careful that you don't die from your own nagging. She continued. That's right, I'm talking nonsense with you right now. That's because, she looked at Xiao with disdain. You are no threat to me, Miss Xiao. Xiao glared at Gu Xingyin so hard that her eyes almost bled. Gu Xingyin didn't care at all. Let me guess. You were holding a knife in front of my face. Were you trying to take my life? Or do you want to humiliate me? Let me guess, it should be both, right? It seems that Miss Axiu still wants to replace this consort's identity? Gu Xingyin said coldly. Unfortunately, you don't have the ability, and you don't have the life. She knew what kind of words could hurt Xiao the most for a woman with a lofty heart like Xiao. Sure enough, if the gaze could turn into a sharp weapon, Gu Xingyin would have been shot to death by Axiu's venomous gaze. Unfortunately, Axiu's gaze didn't have this ability, so she could only stare. Don't look at me like that. You want to take my life, but I don't intend to take revenge. Thinking about it, I'm really quite kind. Axiu's gaze paused for a moment and looked at Gu Xingyin suspiciously, as if she didn't believe that she would let her go. 8-night watch. Good night, everyone. By the way, I'd like to ask for a monthly ticket to recommend you. Chapter 1086. Gu Xingyin suddenly smiled. She seldom smiled. There were two reasons for a beauty who seldom smiled. One was that she was not as good-looking when she smiled. The other was that she was cold and did not like to smile. But when she smiled occasionally, it was extremely stunning. Chu Feiwan obviously belonged to the latter. When she smiled like this, Axiu even vaguely felt that the entire dark cave seemed to light up because of her smile. Even though they were both women, and she did not want to admit it. But the fact was, Chu Feiwan was a woman who was so beautiful that others could not even be jealous of her. However, Axiu's mood didn't improve because of her laughter, nor did she relax because she said that she wouldn't take her life. She did not know Chu Feiwan, but she did not believe that a woman who had been undefeated in hundreds of battles, who was crowned as a queen and was respected by the emperors of 3 dynasties, would let go of her after being murdered. Seeing that Xiao did not look happy, Gu Xingyin thought to herself that Xiao was not as naive as she thought. She did not want to waste too much time on such a woman, so she only said one sentence. You can still avoid the evils of heaven, but you can't survive the evils you bring upon yourself. Then, Xiao felt that everything went black and she lost consciousness. She was woken up by the noise of the crowd. When she opened her eyes, she found that she was back at Xiu's house, surrounded by people. It seemed that all the people in this small village had gathered at her house. How could this happen? How could she be so vicious? She must have been possessed by something unclean. She listened to these words in a daze. Finally, she remembered something, and her expression suddenly became frightened. What did she remember? Just last night, before she went to take Gu Xingyin away, she thought that she would never return to this godforsaken place again. She also recalled the insults and disdain that Xiu's family had given her over the past few days. Resentment rose in her heart. She put a handful of powder ground from poisonous wolf spots in the big water tank at home. If it was in the teapot, it might be poured away, but if it was in the water tank, this family would definitely drink water. She just didn't want them to live. If her plan succeeded, she could naturally leave, and this place would no longer have anything to do with her. However, she had failed. Who would have thought that Qingyuan King would recover his memories ahead of time? To her, what was even more unexpected was that Gu Xingyin actually sent her back. She was tied up by the angry villagers and her mouth was gagged. She wanted to quibble, but those people didn't want to listen to her. Eldest Auntie Zhou's entire family was dead. She was the only one left alive. They also found some herbs in her room that had not been packed properly. The only doctor in the village flipped through the medical books and recognized that 3 of the herbs were highly toxic. He didn't recognize the others, but he didn't think they were anything good. Auntie Zhang looked at her and sighed. I watched Xiu grow up. She used to be such a well-behaved girl. Later, I don't know what happened, but she became like this. In my opinion, she must have been bewitched. Hearing this, Wangpa became excited. Isn't that so? I already knew that something was wrong with her. She must have been possessed by something unclean. Chapter 1087. People in the mountains were simple and ignorant. In addition, Xiu's performance during this period was really suspicious. So many people agreed with Grandma Wang's words. Someone hesitated and said, "Then what should we do now?" Grandma Wang's face was full of wrinkles. In Xiu's eyes, she was like a devil. She smiled gloomily. Such an evil thing has been tightly tied to Xiu. We can only burn her to death with fire. Aunt Zhang, who was gentle by nature, couldn't bear it. That's too cruel. Grandma Wang was full of energy at this moment. It seemed that if she could really burn Xiu to death this time, she would get immeasurable merits. She turned around and looked at the villagers. You think it's cruel? Think about it. This evildoer can even kill her own parents and siblings. If she is left alive, who can guarantee that she won't have bad thoughts about others? As soon as she said this, everyone was silent. Yes. Xiu didn't even recognize her own parents. What if they were poisoned to death? What if they were harmed in the future? The village was noisy, but Shirley didn't know at all. He came in the morning. After eating with Gu Xingyin, he went hunting in the mountains. In the morning, he was still wondering why he fell asleep directly in the yard last night. Gu Xingyin casually changed the topic with a few words. The 2 of them were hunting here. The people who stayed in the village had tacitly agreed with Grandma Wang's words. Xiu, who had been listening to the villagers' discussion, opened her eyes wide. Her body was tied up and her mouth was gagged. She could only twist crazily as if she was crazy. But she didn't know that her appearance made people believe that she was really possessed by a ghost. Xiu's mind was full of the words fire now. She was a surgeon herself and had seen all kinds of burn patients in the hospital. The burned skin, the disgusting and ferocious appearance, the painful wails of the patients, and the condemnation of the people around who didn't listen to her kept repeating in her mind. It could make people crazy. Her struggle was useless. A tall pile of firewood was set up at the entrance of the village. She was even splashed with some oil and tied to the pile of firewood. Under the pile of firewood were 4 corpses covered in white cloth. They were Xiu's parents and 2 younger brothers. The 4 of them died in a rather miserable manner. Even the man who dared to fight with the wild beasts in the village had an ugly expression on his face after seeing this. Wangpa had said this. Only by seeing the evil spirit die in front of them with their own eyes would the 4 of them be able to rest in peace. Only then would their souls be able to enter the cycle of reincarnation, and become humans again. Axiu was already in despair. At this level, unless a miracle appeared, she would not be able to escape no matter what. The flame ignited and instantly leaped onto her skin. Ah! She raised her head, and the feeling of the flames burning her body made her let out a silent scream. It was so painful. Why wasn't she dead? Why did she come to this world? The villagers silently looked at the figure twisting and turning. Some soft-hearted people silently turned their heads away, unable to bear to continue watching, but no one opened their mouth to stop him. By the time Gu Xingyin and Shirlei returned to the village, everything was almost over. The body above the bonfire had long lost its vitality. It could not even be called a body now. All that was left was a pile of charcoal. Chapter 1088. Shirlei still didn't understand the situation, so he hurried over to ask what had happened. Someone had already told him what had happened to Aunt Zhou's family. How could it be? Shirlei was about to step forward when he suddenly thought of something. He said to Gu Xingyin behind him, "Alwan, don't follow me." He did not look at the charred corpse. Instead, he lifted the white cloth on one of the corpses. With just a glance, he put down his hand with a bad look. Was it really Xiao who did it? He didn't want to believe that Xiao, who grew up with him, would be such a person. At this time, Wang Pa heard his words and said loudly, "It's not Xiao. Our Xiao is a good girl. It's just that she was possessed by a wandering ghost from who knows where. And that's why she did such a horrible thing." Shirlei frowned. He didn't believe in such a strange thing. But everyone saw the change in Xiao. It was as if she was a different person. He couldn't even find a reason to speak for Xiao. And now, she was gone. He sighed silently in his heart and walked back to Gu Xingyin. "What's the matter?" Gu Xingyin asked. Shirlei shook his head. "Don't look. Let's go home." In the next few days, Shirlei didn't go out to hunt. Instead, he set up a tomb for Aunt Zhou's family with the villagers in the mountain village. At least they could be buried in the ground. But he didn't ask Gu Xingyin to go out. He only said that this kind of thing was inauspicious. As a girl, it was better not to see it. When Xiao's matter was over, Gu Xingyin also felt that it was time to tell Shirlei her identity. After dinner, Gu Xingyin suddenly called out to Shirlei after he was done packing up. "Big brother Shir." She called him softly. Shirlei turned his head. He was keenly aware of a change. He looked at Gu Xingyin. The person in front of him still looked the same, but he felt that something was wrong. "Alwan." He panicked for a moment and forced a smile. "What happened?" Gu Xingyin looked at him quietly. "I remember now." Shirlei's eyes trembled as he revealed a smile. "Congratulations." Gu Xingyin saw a trace of uneasiness in his eyes. She said, "My full name is Chu Feilwan. I am the princess of Tianzi Kingdom." Shirlei widened his eyes. He had long guessed that Alwan's identity was not simple, but no matter how he thought about it, he had never thought that she was the princess. In their small mountain village, even the county magistrate was a legendary figure. Not to mention the princess. Alwan was actually a princess? It wasn't strange. For a woman like Luan, if she wasn't a princess, who else could be worthy of her? Shirlei didn't know what he was feeling right now. Amidst all these thoughts, what he was most concerned about was still, since Alwan had regained her memory. Did she still mean what she said about leaving this place with her? Shirlei really wanted to ask this question. But looking at Gu Xingyin, who seemed to have an additional layer of dignity after regaining her memory, he actually didn't dare to ask. What if Alwan refused? In the end, he just smiled and said, "It turns out that Alwan's identity is so powerful. No wonder." He didn't finish his words because Gu Xingyin came in front of him. She reached out her hand and covered his mouth. "If you don't want to say something against your will, don't say it. If you don't want to laugh, don't laugh." Chapter 1089. Tianzi's men came a little faster than expected. On this day, Gu Xingyin was still hunting with Shirlei outside when she received a message from the system. The men sent by Emperor Tianzi to look for her had arrived at this small mountain village. "What's wrong with Alwan?" Shirlei asked when he saw her expression was a little strange. Gu Xingyin raised her eyebrows and smiled at him. My men are here. Shirley immediately understood what she meant. Did her subordinates come looking for him? The two were not in the mood to hunt, so they packed up and returned to the small mountain village. As soon as they entered, Shirley found that something was wrong. Usually at this time, the mountain village would be lively. But today it was quiet. Even the little wolf cub raised by Aunt Zhang did not howl. The two walked inside and finally found the reason for all this at the gate of Shirley's courtyard. Dozens of people were densely packed together. They were all wearing armor and holding strong horses in their hands. They stood there without saying a word. How could the mountain people have seen such a scene? After realizing that these knights had no malice towards them, the whole mountain village curiously ran out of their homes and stood there quietly to watch. It was said that they were looking for Miss Alwan. After the leading knight heard that a beautiful girl named Alwan had come here 2 months ago, he asked for the address of Big Stone's house and ran here to guard. Under such circumstances, Gu Xingyin and Shirley, who came in from outside, made their footsteps extra conspicuous. The knights all looked over at him. Just a glance. A look of excitement appeared on everyone's faces as they knelt down in unison in the direction of Gu Xingyin. Your Highness, we pay our respects to you. The people in the mountain were stunned by this scene. Her Highness? There was a princess in their village who had lived here for more than 2 months? Then they saw that Miss Alwan, who was usually just a little cold, had a serious expression, and her whole momentum seemed to be different from before. Rise. Gu Xingyin said faintly. It's been hard on you to find this place. The leading knight looked very excited. It's not hard at all. To be able to find the princess, we don't feel that it's hard at all. He glanced at Gu Xingyin's coarse hemp clothes and felt that the princess had suffered a lot in the past few months. Your Highness has suffered a lot during this period of time. Gu Xingyin shook her head. No. I am indebted to the people of this mountain village for taking care of me during this period of time. I have not suffered any grievances. The leading knight didn't say anything, but in his heart, he still felt that the princess was just comforting him. He looked around the place. How could he not feel aggrieved in such a place? A casual female knight came over with something in her hands. Your Highness, please change your clothes and follow us back to the capital. All right. Gu Xingyin glanced at Shirley beside her. Prepare a set of clothes and a horse for him to leave with me. Yes. Hearing this, those knights looked at Shirley curiously. They didn't know what this mountain hunter had done to attract the princess's attention. However, Shirley pursed his lips. Although he knew that the princess's life must be full of attendants, he still felt a little confused when he saw the valiant knights with his own eyes. Chapter 1090. Unlike Shirley, who was at a loss, the other people in the mountain only felt unusually excited when they saw this scene. Shirley, who was able to leave this place with Gu Xingyin, was also very envious. Miss Luan is the princess. I knew it. Miss Luan is so beautiful. How could she be an ordinary person? Why is Big Stone so lucky? In fact, these mountain people did not understand what Her Highness represented at all. However, just this group of knights was enough to broaden their horizons. In their eyes, Shirley, who was able to leave this place with Gu Xingyin, had also become a person of great fortune. Soon, Gu Xingyin changed her clothes and came out. Shirley had never seen such a dazzling Luan. She was wearing a silver armor. Her hair was tied up with a white jade crown, and a white cloak of the same color was draped over her shoulders. She had always been beautiful, but this beauty, under the exquisite and gorgeous makeup, showed an even more shocking effect. Even those knights who had seen Chu Failwan in this way for many times would be amazed each time they saw her. Not to mention the villagers. Gu Xingyin did not linger. She glanced at Shirley and a knight brought a horse over. Do you know how to ride a horse? The man was very friendly. After all, this man was the princess's savior and the person she wanted to take away. No one dared to look down on him. Yes. Shirley nodded. Another knight brought a large bag and handed it to the village chief. This is a gift from the princess. She has been here for a long time. Thank you for taking care of her. The old village chief's hands were trembling. He kept saying that he did not dare to do it. Gu Xingyin looked at everyone and nodded to the people behind her. Let's go. Shirley also mounted his horse. He turned around to look at the mountain people behind him, and the courtyard where he grew up. He thought for a moment and said loudly, "I still have a lot of food in my courtyard. Let's share it among ourselves. If I have the chance, I will come back to visit you." After he finished speaking, he turned his horse around and chased after the knights in front of him. There were no delays along the way. Every time they passed by a place, they would buy some food there. The rest of the time was spent hurrying along. Shirley had broadened his horizons along the way. He had never seen so many people in his life. Such a big and beautiful house, so many dazzling goods, such a lively market. The knights in the team were very friendly to him. Seeing him like this, they didn't mock him. Instead, they patiently explained to him what he didn't understand. He even patted him on the shoulder and laughed. "You think this kind of place is prosperous? When you reach our heavenly swamp capital, I'm afraid your eyes won't be able to see enough. Heavenly swamp capital city, where Alwan grew up." Shirley smiled and said, "Then I'll have to take a good look." Along the way, Gu Xingyin did not show any special expression to Shirley. Now this was the best. Someone who saved her life and was honest and dutiful. No one would be blind enough to dislike him or deal with him. However, if that person was deeply favored by Her Highness, and even won her heart, then Shirley's life would not be easy. Shirley was not stupid. He knew that Gu Xingyin was doing this for his own good. He also knew that his path was not easy. He wanted everyone to look at him seriously and think that he was worthy of Alwan. There was only one way. Become stronger. Chapter 1091. After 3 months, Emperor Tianzhe, who finally received news of his daughter, personally welcomed Gu Xingyin and her entourage at the city gate. As a dignified emperor, in front of countless officials and commoners, he shed tears as he looked at his daughter who had been missing for months. Even Gu Xingyin's heart was filled with sorrow when she saw this. This emperor really loved his daughter from the bottom of his heart. Gu Xingyin also mentioned that when she was seriously injured and fell off the cliff, she was saved by Shirley. At this moment, the emperor was very grateful to the person who saved his daughter's life. After summoning Shirley to see him, he felt happy when he saw his handsome figure and resolute face. He immediately prepared to write an edict to bestow him with a noble title. However, Shirley stepped forward and bowed to the emperor. "Your Highness is the daughter of the emperor and naturally has great fortune. Even without this commoner, Your Highness would have been able to turn danger into safety. It is this commoner's fortune to be able to save Your Highness' life by chance. I dare not claim credit for this." Gu Xingyin was very surprised. She didn't expect this big stone to become so eloquent in just a few days. The emperor seemed to be surprised that he could say such words. He looked at him carefully and saw that his eyes were sincere and didn't seem to be fake. His impression of him improved. He smiled and said, "But you saved my Alwan. Even as a father, I have to thank you." Shirley said seriously, "This commoner is from the mountains and only has brute strength. If Your Highness doesn't mind, this commoner would like to join the army and contribute to Tianzhe." At this time, Gu Xingyin's eyes lit up. She said to the emperor, "Father, I was just about to tell you that this Shirley doesn't just have brute strength. He was born with divine strength and infinite strength. I once saw him hunt with my own eyes and saw him lift a beast that weighed 500 to 600 kilograms. Oh, the emperor's eyes also lit up. Nowadays, the various countries were at war. If his country could have another fierce general, its strength would be greatly increased. It wasn't appropriate to stay at the city gate for too long. The emperor and his entourage rushed back to Tianzhe Palace and specially set up a banquet for Gu Xingyin's return. Some of Tianzhe Kingdom's loyal ministers also attended the banquet. After Gu Xingyin went back, she was hugged by the Empress of Tianzhe and complained tearfully. During the banquet, the emperor suddenly mentioned Shirley's innate strength. "I wonder if Warrior Shir is willing to show me his skills?" Shirley stood up. "Of course." Thus, several guards worked together to carry something in. It was a cauldron. The emperor pointed at the cauldron. "This is the giant cauldron that the great ancestor ordered people to forge when our Tianzhe dynasty was founded." It weighs 1,246 caddies. Usually, it requires 6 strong men to lift it. My son said that you have boundless strength. I wonder if you can lift it? Shirley glanced at the cauldron. He wasn't sure if he had the strength to do so. He could only cup his hands and say, "This commoner has never seen such a heavy thing before. I don't know if I can carry it, but I am willing to try." The emperor felt a sense of novelty in his heart. It had been a long time since someone spoke so frankly in front of him. He smiled and said, "Warrior Shir, just do your best. Don't force yourself." Shirley stood up and approached the cauldron. The entire palace hall suddenly quieted down. Let's not talk about the civil officials first. They clearly didn't believe that someone could lift such a heavy cauldron. Other than doubt, the generals were also a little excited. If this person really had innate strength, they must find a way to recruit him. Such a person on the battlefield was simply a human-shaped murder weapon. Chapter 1092. Among all the people, only Gu Xingyin has no doubt that Shirley can lift this giant cauldron. She was the only one who had seen Shirley grab the beast and throw it out like a plaything. The amount of energy needed to throw something and simply lift it up was on a completely different level. Not to mention that Shirley did not even blush or pant after throwing the beast. He did not feel tired at all. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Shirley calms his mind, opens his legs slightly, and firmly fastens them. His hands firmly grab the 2 legs of the giant cauldron. After a loud shout, the giant cauldron is actually lifted up by him. The people in the hall all widen their eyes. There are even many people who unconsciously stand up when the cauldron is lifted up. Gu Xingyin carefully looks at Shirley and finds that his face is a little red. But it seems that he is far from reaching his limit, and does not look like he is forcing himself. Only then does she feel relieved. Shirley even lifts the cauldron and walks around the hall before putting it on the ground. When the cauldron is put on the ground, it does not make a big impact, indicating that Shirley still has the strength to put it down properly. Good. When the cauldron is put down, the emperor's face is overjoyed and says good. He personally pours 2 cups of wine, and comes down from his seat in front of Shirley. "Mr. Shir, Jean salutes you." Shirley took the wine cup and drank it without hesitation. Seeing this, the emperor is even more delighted. At this time, a person dressed as a general stands up. "Your Majesty, Mr. Shir is born with divine strength. This is a gift from the heavens to our Tianze. This subject boldly asks your Majesty to allow Mr. Shir to be under my command." As soon as he finishes speaking, another person stands up and says that he just happens to lack such a vanguard under his command. Tianze's army is in the hands of the emperor, but every general has his own army. Therefore, they all want to recruit such a promising young man under their command. Gu Xingyin watched them fight with each other calmly. "Want to snatch someone from her? You are still a little lacking." Sure enough, Shirley does not move. He quietly stands on the side and does not speak. The emperor leisurely drank a few cups of wine before he said with a smile, "My beloved ministers, you're a little slow in taking action." What did His Majesty mean? The generals looked at each other. Could it be that someone else had known about Mr. Shir's innate strength before them? The emperor laughed heartily. "My Luan told me as soon as she came back that Mr. Shir must be her subordinate." The emperor was so biased that he would give Chu Feilwan whatever she wanted. He even said that as long as she was willing, he could pass the throne to her. It was clear how much he doted on his daughter. The generals all looked at Gu Xingyin, who was sitting at the head of the table. When they saw her sitting there motionlessly, they suddenly realized why the princess was so calm today. It turned out that it had been prepared for a long time. Well, if the princess wanted someone, then it definitely had nothing to do with them. The generals are all shrewd people. They know exactly what the emperor is thinking. Not to mention that Gu Xingyin told the emperor in advance. Even if the emperor did not mention it, as long as she wanted it, she would have to say it first. At this point, Shirley's ownership is settled. Until now, Shirley's tightly clenched fists relaxed a little. 8 o'clock, good night everyone. The new week, tickets go. Chapter 1093. After they left the palace, Gu Xingyin led him onto the horse. Let's go, I'll show you my military camp. They didn't walk fast. Shirley, you've seen today how much Imperial Father dotes on me. Gu Xingyin looked at him. I'm not saying this to show off. I just want to tell you that it won't be easy for you to marry me. Shirley tilted his head and looked at her attentively with a unique gentleness. I know. So? Shirley's tone was firm. So I won't give up. Alwan, you have to wait for me. Gu Xingyin smiled. Okay, I'll wait for you. She had waited for 5 years when she said wait. In these 5 years, she ignored the marriage proposals of countless princes and princes. She rejected her father and mother's suggestions and waited wholeheartedly for that man to grow up. Tianzi country had a fierce general. When he first showed his talent, he was just a small soldier. But that soldier killed thousands of people in a battle between Tianzi country and Yunzi country, and captured the enemy's leader alive. Then he went from an ordinary soldier to a protector, to a deputy general, to a commander, to a general, to a general, to a general, to a general. He used the blood of his enemies and his own achievements to reach a point where no one could ignore him. Speaking of Heavenly Lake's military generals, the first people that came to mind were 2 people. Chu Feilwan, the princess of Tianzi country, who had never lost a battle despite being a woman, together with her subordinate, Shirley, who was known as the great general of the Heavenly Grace Army, who was known to be able to kill 10,000 people on the battlefield, whose strength could carry a cauldron and whose bravery was unparalleled in the world. Actually, with Shirley's current rank, he could have led an army alone. But he had always been under Gu Xingyin's command. Everyone praised him for being grateful, and said that he was grateful to the princess for recognizing his worth. Only he knew that he stayed here because he wanted to be closer to her. When the autumn leaves of Tianzi country all fell, the emperor of Tianzi country welcomed his 50th birthday. At this time, Shirley was still on the battlefield. During the banquet, while the wine was being drunk, an urgent report came from the entrance of the palace. Reporting to your majesty, the general of the army has returned to the court. He has attached the document of Yunzi's surrender to congratulate your majesty on your birthday. As soon as he said this, everyone was shocked. Are you serious? The emperor was overjoyed and sobered up. He couldn't help but stand up from his seat. It's absolutely true. The great general of the army rushed back to the imperial court, especially on the occasion of His Majesty's birthday. The army is still in Yinzhou. The wine glass in Gu Xingyin's hand trembled. The wine spilled out and soaked her sleeve before disappearing without a trace. This man had rushed here from the Cloud State. Did he have to risk his life like this? Quick, 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 come with me to welcome the great general. The emperor was overjoyed and actually got up to go out personally. Gu Xingyin hurriedly got up and stopped him. Father, it is enough for me to go and greet General Shi. If you go personally, I am afraid he will be uneasy. The emperor was too happy at first. Now that he had calmed down, he also felt that this was inappropriate. When he heard Gu Xingyin take the initiative to step forward, he nodded. Then go and greet the meritorious official of Tianzi on behalf of Father. Yes, Your Majesty. Gu Xingyin's footsteps were a little hurried. The eunuch behind her thought that it was because the princess was happy, so he didn't find it strange. But she didn't know. The princess was indeed happy, but it wasn't because Yunzi had surrendered. It was because that man had finally returned. Chapter 1094. A black figure came into Gu Xingyin's sight from afar. He was wearing a thick black cloak, and his face looked haggard. His face seemed to be thinner, and his skin was darker. His eyes were colder. His aura was more frightening. This was the evil spirit accumulated from human blood in a mountain of corpses, and a sea of blood. Even Gu Xingyin saw that the guards standing beside Shirley were sweating profusely on such a cold day. Of course, it was not because of the heat. In fact, even Gu Xingyin's first impulse when he saw him was to draw his sword. Their eyes met. The two of them looked at each other quietly, without any extra movements. They all understood the meaning in their eyes. Gu Xingyin spoke first. General Shi, I am here to welcome you back under the orders of my father. Shirley bowed in the direction of the main hall, and then he bowed to Gu Xingyin. Thank you, Your Highness. The eunuchs beside them did not dare to say anything. They could not express their feelings. They only felt that when the two of them were together, the atmosphere was so tense that no one dared to disturb them. When the two of them left, the guards at the gate of the palace sighed in relief. They finally left. You didn't see that when General Shur was standing here, my hand never left the long sword at my waist. Brother, you are amazing. You even wanted to draw your sword. I almost fell to the ground. The two guards were discussing in a low voice. They looked at each other, and their eyes were filled with shock. It was too scary. He could do this with just one look. Gu Xingyin and Shirley walked side by side. The two of them were very close to each other. In the eyes of outsiders, General Shur was the princess's trusted aide, so it was normal for them to have a good relationship. There was nothing wrong with it. Only the two of them knew that under the cover of their sleeves, their hands were tightly clasped together. Shirley held her hand tightly, but he did not dare to use too much strength. It was as if he had placed all his attention on the hand that was holding the other person's. Later, when he presented his achievements, what awaited him would be countless praises and rewards. But to Shirley right now, none of that mattered anymore. He only wanted to make this road a little longer, a little longer. It was best to let him continue walking with her like this. But no matter how long the road was, there would always be an end. Even if they were holding hands, they would still have to part. Gu Xingyin released his hand and the two of them walked into the main hall. Shirley bowed deeply to the emperor. Maintaining a half-kneeling posture, he raised the document in his hand. It was the Cloud Swamp Country's emperor's surrender document. The emperor personally got off the main seat and pulled him up. Then he read the letter word by word. Good. He laughed loudly as he looked at Shirley. Almost without hesitation, he conferred the title of Marquis of 10,000 households. Shirley knelt down at this moment. I don't ask for a marquis, nor do I ask for a reward of 1,000 gold coins. I only ask for your majesty to promise me one thing. The emperor was in a good mood and asked, What is the matter? Shirley lowered his head and said the words that he had hidden in his heart for 5 years. I ask your majesty to marry Princess Fei Luan to me. The main hall fell into silence. The emperor's expression froze for a moment. Gu Xingyin held the wine cup in her hand. Even her usually calm state of mind showed a trace of nervousness. The emperor looked down at the man in front of him. This man was resolute and strong. Now he had the best military achievements in the world. It was not bad for such a man to be his Luan's son-in-law. Chapter 1095. However, the emperor glanced at his expressionless daughter and felt a little troubled. Over the past few years, there had been quite a few men who had asked for Alwan's hand in marriage. However, no matter who it was, Alwan would always reply with 2 words. Not marrying. Although it was true that the emperor's daughter didn't have to worry about marriage, which parent didn't worry about their children's marriage? If it was someone else, the emperor wouldn't have to be so conflicted. He would just issue an edict, and the girl would have to marry him whether she wanted to or not. However, this stubborn girl was his favorite daughter. The emperor could even ignore the objections of all the courtiers and send her to the battlefield. Why would he let his daughter suffer because of a marriage? Hence, the emperor didn't agree on the spot. Instead, he turned to look at Gu Xingyin. The courtiers also lowered their heads and focused their attention on Gu Xingyin. Some of them were thinking, why doesn't General Shur take this opportunity to earn a title? With his military achievements, he would definitely have a bright future. Why would he have to worry about not having a beautiful wife? Princess Fei Luan was beautiful, but she was too stubborn. A woman like her might not be a good wife. Most importantly, this princess had already rejected countless marriage proposals. If General Shur were to be rejected again this time, as a man, it would not look good for him. Gu Xingyin didn't move under everyone's gaze. She remained silent for a long time before saying, Everything will be decided by father. See, it was indeed a rejection. Wait. Many people took a moment to react. What did Princess Fei Luan just say? Everything will be decided by father. In other words, the girl was too embarrassed to agree on the spot, so she pushed the blame onto her father. The emperor was also a little confused. However, he couldn't help but smile after recovering. Did Alwan just agree? He looked at his daughter. She didn't have much of an expression on her face. It was as if the decision she just made wasn't something that would decide her life. Looking at the courtiers, the emperor felt a sense of belonging when he saw their shocked expressions. That's right, this reaction is normal. He coughed softly and looked at Shirley, who was still kneeling on the ground. The emperor's gaze unconsciously softened. Yes, previously, Shirley was a subject that he thought highly of. Now he was looking at him as a son-in-law. General Shir, you may rise, the emperor said to Shirley. Alwan is my most beloved daughter. General Shir, please take care of her in the future. With that, the matter was settled. Shirley tried his best to conceal the ecstasy in his eyes. He cupped his hands and said, Please rest assured, Your Majesty. When he returned to his seat, his colleagues around him looked at him differently. Before this, in their eyes, General Shir was a junior with a boundless future. With his military achievements, it was even possible for him to become one of the 3 ministers in the future. But now, it wasn't just a possibility. It was a sure thing. He was about to become Princess Feilwan's son-in-law. Everyone knew how much the emperor doted on Princess Feilwan. If she was a man, she would have been the heir to the throne a long time ago. For the sake of Princess Feilwan's reputation, even if General Shir was a good-for-nothing, the emperor would still promote him. Not to mention, not only was he not a good-for-nothing, he was also a one-in-a-million talent. Chapter 1096. As soon as Shirley returned to his residence, a decree came from the palace. 2 decrees came one after another. The first decree conferred him the title of Duke Xingua, and gave him a mansion of the same grade as well as countless gold, silver, and treasures. The second decree was for Duke Xingua Shirley and Princess Feilwan to marry each other. Thank you, Your Majesty. Shirley kowtowed. He had never been so sincere before. The eunuch who delivered the decree saw his forehead turn red. He sighed in his heart that Duke Xingua was an honest man. Other people just needed to put on an act to show their gratitude. But he didn't know how long Shirley had waited for this day, and how long he had endured it. Chu Feilwan was not young anymore. The emperor and empress were very anxious. It was rare for her to agree to the marriage herself. The next day, the emperor found someone from the imperial astronomer to calculate the date and pick the nearest auspicious day. Even if it was the nearest, it would be 2 months later. The princesses of this dynasty usually started preparing for their weddings half a year in advance. They had never been so anxious. If it was any other princess, people would say that she was not favored, and the dowry would be overstated. But no one dared to think that it was Gu Xingyin. Anyway, this Princess Feilwan was never a person who played by the rules. In the palace, the emperor and empress kept a close eye on everything that was sent to Princess Feilwan. The empress had to check everything carefully. There was also the emperor, who had ordered his men to open up his own treasury. He wanted nothing more than to empty out the entire treasury and use it to supplement his daughter. Her husband, who had served her for dozens of years, was speechless. From the looks of it, those who didn't know better would think that Princess Feilwan was going to get married to some desolate place, as if they would never see her again in this life. My Majesty, Princess Feilwan is in the capital. Anyway, the servants didn't dare to be careless with the empress' attitude. They prepared everything to the best of their ability. 2 months later, 10 miles of red dowry. From the palace gate to the princess residence. Shirley sat on a tall horse and looked at the red makeup in his eyes. He actually had a surreal feeling in his heart. 5 years ago, he met that fairy-like beautiful woman and followed her out of the mountains. At the very beginning, all he wanted was to stay by her side. Until now, he could finally take her under his wing in a justifiable manner. Duke Xingua's manner. Everyone could tell that the Marquis was in a good mood today. There was a slight smile on his handsome face, and even the aura around him became gentler. That's right, there are 3 joyous events in life: the wedding night. Especially when the bride was such a beauty. Which man wouldn't be happy? There were a few men who had been rejected by Gu Xingyin who were jealous and secretly planned to get this lucky guy drunk. Shirley pretended not to know anything, and did not reject anyone. In the end, the Marquis of Country guarding Marquis flew away, and the ground was littered with people. Many of Shirley's subordinates who had fought alongside him looked at those young masters with disdain. Master Ho could drink 1,000 cups without getting drunk. How could he drink with these gigolos? You want to defeat me too? He was simply overestimating himself. Actually, Shirley was a little drunk. But he didn't know if it was the wine or the red sky that was intoxicating. She was waiting for him in the room. He walked steadily towards the bridal chamber. Chapter 1097. Mandarin ducks, brocade quilt, dragons, phoenixes, red candles, and a happy beauty. The matron of honor was waiting in the bridal chamber for the couple to complete the last rites. What Shirley wanted to do most now was to be alone with Alwan, without anyone disturbing them. But those rites couldn't be left out. This was his and Alwan's wedding, so of course everything had to be done perfectly. The moment the bride's veil was lifted, the room was filled with light. They ate raw glutinous rice balls, drank cross-cupped wine, and tied the knot without any hesitation. Finally, all the extra people left. In their world, there was only each other left. Shirley could no longer suppress the excitement in his heart. His hands trembled slightly as he caressed Gu Xingyin's face. Alwan. Gu Xingyin looked at him and smiled, softly replying, "Yes. You are mine?" In the end, there was a trace of uncertainty. Gu Xingyin held his leaving hand and smiled like a flower. "I am yours." The hibiscus curtain was warm, a night of spring. Historical records. Tianzi country's Qingwan king, Chu Failwan, fell off a cliff at the age of 20 and met the country guarding Marquis, Shirley. They were comrades for 5 years, and after that, they were husband and wife for 40 years. The two had a son and 2 daughters and were very close. The Qingwan king's old injury flared up, and he died in the backyard. In less than a month, the country guarding Marquis, who had always been healthy, fell ill and died. Shirley lay on the bed, unable to speak. He felt the strength in his body gradually leaving him. There was a noise in his ears. He could tell that it was his and Alwan's daughter crying. What is she crying for? He thought. He had lived enough in this life. He had too many things that others could not even dream of. It could be said that he had everything a man wanted. Now his grandchildren had all grown up, and there was no one in the Marquis residence that he cared about. His Alwan had been gone for a month. He could not let her wait for too long. The bridge of helplessness was not easy to cross, and she would not be happy if she was alone. Gradually his ears couldn't hear anything clearly. His eyes opened in vain, but the Fusho double-patterned bed curtain in his line of sight was still getting more and more blurry. There was a glimmer of light in the darkness. That woman, who was still as beautiful as ever, was wearing a snow-white cloak. She turned her head to look at him and complained unhappily. "Why did you come so late? I've been waiting for a long time." He smiled. "I'm coming." The people around only saw the thin old man on the bed reveal a faint smile and murmur, "Alwan, I'm here." He wasn't breathing. The middle-aged woman who had been holding back her tears finally burst into tears. The country guarding Marquis, Shirley, passed away at the age of 72. Gu Xingyin stayed in the space, watching the scene after his death. There was silence for a long time. The system came out to comfort her. "Host, please don't be sad. These are all illusions." "Illusory?" Gu Xingyin shook her head. If these were all illusions, then what was he? Then what was he? Then what was the world that she had experienced with him? "No, to me these are the most real experiences," she said softly. Her eyes were a little sore, but she did not cry. This was far from the end. They still had countless chances to start over. "System, let's go to the next world." "Yes, host, beginning world transfer." "Host, please prepare." Gu Xingyin closed her eyes and began a new journey. Chapter 1098. There was a girl named Zhong Zhonghuan. Her family was rich and her mother died early. Her father was busy with his career and neglected to discipline her. When she was 16, she became a top student in a private high school. She was rebellious and had poor grades, but had an extraordinary sensitivity to fashion. She would spend the 3 years between the ages of 16 and 19 fooling around. Then on the night she turned 19, she suddenly had an epiphany. Not only did she bury the hatchet with her father, but she also designed a blueprint herself and submitted it to an internationally renowned designer. Then she was recommended by the designer to a world-renowned design school and became the apprentice of the chief design director of a well-known international luxury brand. Then, while still in school, her design talent began to show and she was recognized by major fashion weeks one after another. Less than 2 years after she finished her apprenticeship, she became famous and stood at the top of the fashion industry. She was called the Hand of God. And her rebellious period when she was young was kindly understood by her fans. Geniuses always had some characteristics that were different from ordinary people. However, at a certain point in time, Zhong Zhonghuan's life was quietly turned around by a person. She was the class monitor in high school. They didn't see eye to eye. Class monitor Chang Ru. Chang Ru and Zhong Zhonghuan were obviously two different types of people. Chang Ru was beautiful, good at her studies, generous and cheerful. Whether it was among the teachers or among the students, she was very popular. Zhong Zhonghuan was arrogant and liked to cause trouble. In the eyes of the teachers, she was the kind of person who couldn't be approached. Zhong Zhonghuan once passed by the school and happened to meet Chang Ru, who was being blackmailed by some gangsters. She was in a good mood that day and stood up for Chang Ru. It wasn't a big deal. But Zhong Zhonghuan didn't know that Chang Ru liked the same sex. Moreover, a teenage girl was actually moved by a hero saving a damsel in distress. Chang Ru's attitude towards Zhong Zhonghuan changed 180 degrees. She cared about her studies and spoke good words for her among the students. When she was free, she offered to make up lessons with her, and even said to the teacher that she wanted to be Zhong Zhonghuan's deskmate. But Zhong Zhonghuan was annoyed by her. She really couldn't understand what the class monitor was thinking. Was this a new way to torture her? Zhong Zhonghuan admitted that if this was really Chang Ru's scheme, then she had won. This was because Zhong Zhonghuan's life had indeed been ruined by Chang Ru. She appeared in all the places in her life where she could appear and had a hand in everything. At the age of 18, during the second semester of the second year of high school, Zhong Zhonghuan fell in love with a sports student from the school next door. In fact, Zhong Zhonghuan didn't have a good impression of that guy, but as a delinquent girl, she had never been in a relationship at a young age. How embarrassing would it be if word got out? Then Zhong Zhonghuan felt miserable. Because on their first date, they were caught red-handed by their homeroom teacher. Then, she wrote a self-reflection letter and called her parents. Zhong Zhonghuan was severely beaten by her father. The next day at school, Zhong Zhonghuan asked Chang Ru directly if she was the one who told on him. Chang Ru admitted to it. Zhong Zhonghuan was so angry at that time. If it weren't for the fact that he didn't hit women, he would have beaten Chang Ru to death. This was not the end. What Zhong Zhonghuan couldn't stand the most was the fact that Chang Ru had tricked her. Chapter 1099. During the third year of high school, Zhong Zhonghuan came to her senses and finally started to study hard. She was smart to begin with. After cramming for half a semester, her grades were actually pretty good. Although her grades weren't enough to get her into a top university in the country, it was enough to go overseas. She heard that a designer she admired happened to be in Z country with his team. She spent 3 days and 3 nights drawing a design that she was most satisfied with. This was the work that she could have used to be recommended to the design academy. However, she didn't try to hide it, so Chang Ru naturally saw it. When Chang Ru asked what it was, Zhong Zhonghuan couldn't stand her repeated questioning, and finally told him. When Chang Ru heard that she was going overseas, he didn't disturb her for the entire day. Zhong Zhonghuan was free. However, she didn't know that when she thought that Chang Ru wouldn't disturb her anymore, he did something even worse. At noon, she specially bought an envelope and carefully placed her design into it. After confirming the address, she prepared to send it to the designer after lunch. Chang Ru watched her put the item into the drawer of the desk. When no one was around, she switched the item inside. Naturally, it was impossible to receive any reply from a blank piece of paper. The designer even thought that she was trying to prank him. He was so angry that he blacklisted her contact information. Zhong Zhonghuan didn't know that the design she had put in so much effort into didn't reach the designer's hands. She thought that it was because the designer didn't like her work, so there was no result. After such a blow, she lost her passion for design. After graduating from high school, she went to a second-tier university. Under Changru's intentions, her school was right next to Zhong Zhanghuan's. However, one was a national key university, while the other was an ordinary university. Changru, who was in university, still liked to pester Zhong Zhanghuan. Over time, no matter how slow Zhong Zhanghuan was, she realized that something was wrong with Changru. Under her probing and secret observation, she finally found something that she couldn't accept. Changru might like her. Thunder from a clear sky. Zhong Zhanghuan had a fiery temper. After discovering it, she directly told Changru. She said that she couldn't accept this kind of thing and asked Changru not to approach her again. Otherwise, she would call the police. At that time, Changru was slightly depressed because of the years of suppression. His secret love for many years had been rudely rejected, so he couldn't figure it out. She pushed Zhong Zhanghuan off the rooftop. Then he jumped down as well. Gu Xingyin accepted the plot expressionlessly. So this is what it means to hate when you can't love someone, and in the end, you cause the deaths of others and yourself. From Gu Xingyin's point of view, Changru's so-called love couldn't even be called love. In the name of love, she interfered with other people's lives and ruined their future. This wasn't love. This was selfishness. She straightened up from the desk she was lying on. That's right, on the desk. It was Zhong Zhanghuan's first year of high school. At this time, Zhong Zhanghuan was still a straight-A student with dyed hair and a row of earrings. The worst thing was that she had just saved the damsel in distress, the day before yesterday. Zhanghuan, I knew you hadn't eaten. Here, I brought something for you. Changru walked into the classroom, and his eyes lit up when he saw Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin sighed inwardly. Chapter 1100. Placed on her desk was a cup of hot milk tea and a paper bag of jianbing. A tempting aroma wafted from the desk into Gu Xingyin's nose. Her stomach, which hadn't eaten lunch, rumbled. Normally, Zhong Zhanghuan would probably turn his face away and pretend he didn't see it. At this moment, the classmate sitting in front of her turned around and said enviously, "Changru, you brought lunch again." Changru smiled and didn't say anything. Gu Xingyin could tell from the student's eyes that he did not think highly of him. Indeed, from their point of view, Changru saw that she hadn't eaten and specially brought her lunch. However, she didn't care about it and let it cool down every time. Then, Changru would silently throw it into the trash can after school. No matter how she looked at it, it was her fault. Gu Xingyin thought for a moment. The jianbing was very fragrant and she was very hungry. Moreover, she needed to turn the situation around. She reached into her trouser pocket and took out $100 bill and placed it in front of Changru. Changru's expression changed. "That's not what I meant," Gu Xingyin said. "I know you're helping your classmate out of kindness, but there's no reason for the class monitor to spend money for nothing. Take this $100 bill as the money you'll pay for lunch for the next 2 days. If you don't want it, I won't be able to eat lunch." It was just before lunch break. Many of the students in the class had already finished eating and returned to the classroom. Gu Xingyin didn't lower her voice when she spoke. Everyone in the class heard what she said. In all fairness, there was nothing wrong with what she said. Gu Xingyin and Changru were just ordinary classmates. There was no reason for her to spend money. However, Gu Xingyin's words made it seem like they were helping each other out. The intimacy that Changru had wanted to connect the two of them instantly disappeared without a trace. Moreover, Changru had to accept the money. Gu Xingyin said, "Class monitor, you can't be so generous. Right now, I'm the only one in our class who doesn't eat. If one day no one eats, won't your living expenses be gone in a day?" Changru choked. She couldn't possibly say that he was different from them and that he was special, right? She had no choice but to take the money with a reluctant look on her face. Only then did Gu Xingyin take the still steaming Chinese crepe on the table and eat it in big bites. It smelled so good. At this time, her desk mate was not Changru, but a quiet girl with glasses. As she ate, Gu Xingyin thought about how to solve Changru's problem. He had to think of a way to make her give up on him. Gu Xingyin looked out of the window casually while eating. A figure caught her attention. He was tall and slender, and Gu Xingyin could tell from his back alone that he was quite good-looking. Actually, she didn't need to look at him to know that he wasn't bad-looking. This man, has he ever looked different in any world? Lindsay! Someone shouted from outside. Then the boy turned his head over. Ah! Gu Xingyin heard a soft exclamation from her deskmate. She turned around and saw her quiet deskmate covering her face with her hands, and looking at the boy outside with blushing cheeks. Sensing Gu Xingyin's gaze, the girl lowered her head in embarrassment. Gu Xingyin didn't think there was anything wrong with her reaction. It was normal for girls to like handsome guys. Moreover, this handsome guy was the trump card of all handsome guys. There was no doubt that the handsome guy was the male lead. Please vote, 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 vote. Chapter 1101. Gu Xingyin looked at the handsome guy outside the window and thought of something. She was staring at the handsome guy outside without blinking. The guy seemed to have sensed something and turned his gaze to her side. Their eyes met. Gu Xingyin smiled brightly and walked over. She waited for him to respond. In the end, he just glanced at her face expressionlessly, as if he didn't see anything. Then he lightly retracted his gaze. Gu Xingyin. Very good, he has character. The boy's figure left, and Gu Xingyin also received his information. Lindsay, a high school freshman, class 3 student. In this year's freshman entrance ceremony, with his perfect 1.85 meters figure and impeccable facial features, there was no doubt that he ascended to the throne of the school's most handsome boy. In this world where beauty was justice, it was easy for good-looking people to be accepted for anything they did. For example, although Lindsay was very handsome, his character was really unflattering. He was like a human-shaped iceberg, expressionless all day long, as if the whole world owed him something. But this kind of character was definitely not a problem in the eyes of these teenage girls. This was character. This was cool. Gu Xingyin looked away and turned back. She immediately met Changru's eyes. It seemed very gentle. She frowned slightly. Actually, Changru's behavior was very obvious. If she had done this to a man and a woman, no one would have suspected what she was thinking. It was because this kind of thing was too unbelievable that the people around her couldn't relate it to love. Gu Xingyin looked away as if she didn't see anything. She wanted Changru to completely give up on her. After school in the afternoon, Gu Xingyin ignored the math teacher's murderous gaze and deliberately left the classroom 10 minutes early. She walked to the door of Class 3's classroom and waited for them to finish school. The sun was very strong and Gu Xingyin couldn't help but close her eyes. When Lindsay turned his head, he saw the girl leaning against the railing outside the classroom. She was wearing exaggerated clothes that were obviously not suitable for the school's style. Her hair was also different from the hair of high school girls, which was long and straight. A string of shiny earrings hung from her ears. Lindsay felt that it was very strange. Logically speaking, he didn't like such exaggerated dressing. Moreover, most people wouldn't feel that it was cool when they put it together like that. Instead, it would feel that it was very tacky. But when it came to this girl, it didn't make people feel that way. She was cool. This was what Lindsay thought. This was the difference brought about by aesthetics. Although Zhong Zhonghuan was in her rebellious phase and liked to be independent, her natural sensitivity to fashion prevented her from messing up her image. However, Lindsay's admiration was limited to this. It had nothing to do with him. He retracted his gaze. School was about to end. There was no such thing as procrastination in this school, so when the bell rang, the teacher stopped teaching and the students began to pack their things. Gu Xingyin watched the teacher leave. Lindsay also packed his things and was about to get up. At this time, she entered Class 3's classroom. The students in Class 3 looked at her curiously. A few of them seemed to recognize her, and whispered to each other. Gu Xingyin walked straight to Lindsay's desk. Chapter 1102. Feeling that he was suddenly blocked by a shadow, Lindsay raised his head. It was the girl who had been standing outside the classroom. What's the matter? He frowned and looked at Gu Xingyin. The strange combination of the two was undoubtedly very easy to arouse people's interest. The students who were tidying up their things all slowed down their movements. They pricked up their ears and paid attention to the movements here. Gu Xingyin bent down and supported herself with one hand on the desk, enveloping Lindsay in her shadow. This posture made Lindsay couldn't help but frown. Gu Xingyin's mouth raised into a cynical smile little by little. Lindsay, let me introduce myself. My name is Zhong Zhonghuan. Zhong as in love at first sight, Zhonghuan as in happiness. Lindsay's eyebrows didn't even move when he heard this. He just said lightly, I see. Can you please leave my desk? Gu Xingyin's smile didn't change and she even moved closer. No, the self-introduction just now was just the foreplay. The main point is later. Lindsay, I fell in love with you at first sight. Can you go out with me? The whole classroom was silent. Lindsay's eyebrows could be piled up into a small mountain. He looked at the girl in front of him with some confusion. She just happened to be looking at him calmly, as if she didn't feel that she had just done anything shocking. He suddenly stood up. This action made Gu Xingyin have to let go of his hand on the desk. The aura that had just been created with great difficulty was instantly destroyed. Lindsay was taller than Gu Xingyin and more than half of his head was injured. He lowered his head and looked down at Gu Xingyin. I'm sorry, classmate. I don't have any thoughts about you, and I refuse your request to go out with you. After he finished speaking, he didn't hesitate to put his bag on his shoulder with one hand and turn to leave. Gu Xingyin half leaned on his desk with a faint smile and didn't chase after him. Sure enough, he had the same personality as the rumors said. However, she wouldn't give up so easily. There was still a long way to go. Gu Xingyin went home. It was rare for her to return home so early. Zhong Zhiping, who had just returned home from work, was surprised to see his daughter sitting on the sofa. If this made him feel surprised, the next moment, his daughter raised her head and called him father, which almost made this man, who was a man of his word in the business world, cry. How long has it been? Ever since the rebellious phase of puberty, this child had an inexplicable hostility towards him. Every time, he would play with someone until the middle of the night before returning home, causing his grades to plummet. When he saw him at home, he would frown and look at him coldly. At most, he would call him dad coldly. He was, after all, a man who had experienced great battles. He was able to return to his normal state in a short period of time. She smiled and replied, You're home so early today? Zhong Zhonghuan looked at the man in front of him. He was wearing a well-ironed suit, and his hair was carefully combed. He looked like a handsome middle-aged man. Calculating his age, Zhong Zhiping was less than 40 years old, but there were already traces of white hair on his temples. Thinking about the plot, during the 3 years when Zhong Zhonghuan was rebellious, the relationship between father and daughter fell to a freezing point. Zhong Zhonghuan didn't know that her father was secretly worried about her. Gu Xingyin didn't have parents, but she knew that in the human world, the most selfless love was often given to their children by parents. If possible, she didn't want to let down any parent's deep affection. Chapter 1103. The father and daughter had a long and thorough conversation. In Gu Xingyin's opinion, there was no unsolvable knot between the father and daughter. Why did they come to this point? It was nothing more than one who always liked to keep things in her heart, and the other who was too busy with his career to discipline her. When the estrangement arose and Zhong Zhiping wanted to save it, Zhong Zhonghuan didn't want him to get close to her world. But for Gu Xingyin, she was willing to give her father such a chance. Zhong Zhiping also understood his daughter's innermost thoughts and plans for the future. He was an open-minded father. When he heard that his daughter wanted to study design and go abroad, he didn't object much. Until Gu Xingyin told her that she had fallen in love with a boy. What did you say? Zhong Zhiping directly raised his voice by 2 degrees. Gu Xingyin calmly repeated her words. It was not that she wanted to provoke her father, but she had just confessed in such a high-profile way this afternoon. It was estimated that the school couldn't hide it. If her parents were called, the consequences would be more serious. It was better for him to confess in the beginning. Zhong Zhiping's reaction was expected. No father could accept his 16-year-old daughter's puppy love. But when he knew that his daughter was still in the stage of unrequited love and her confession was rejected, he was angry again. Who is this brat? How dare he look down on our Huan Huan? In Zhong Zhiping's eyes, it was one thing for him to not allow his daughter to have puppy love, but it was another thing for others to look down on his daughter. No matter in the eyes of parents, their children were always the best. Gu Xingyin struck while the iron was hot. So Dad, he doesn't like me, right? I will work harder to pursue him, and let him fall in love with me to prove my charm as a daughter. Hearing her words, Zhong Zhiping raised his eyebrows. Do you think I am a fool? It was such an obvious provocation. Did she think that he couldn't hear it? Gu Xingyin smiled. But I can't help it. I know it is wrong to have puppy love, but I can't help it. I like him. She stared at Zhong Zhiping with her eyes wide open. Don't only allow the officials to set fires, but not the common people. Don't think I don't know that you told my mom that you were high school classmates. Zhong Zhiping looked at her in surprise. How did you know? Gu Xingyin smiled proudly. Of course, my mother secretly told me when I was young. Of course, it was the almighty system that told her this. Hearing his daughter mention his late wife, Zhong Zhiping fell into a rare silence. He had a very good relationship with his wife. Otherwise, he wouldn't have stayed single for so many years after his wife had passed away. With his qualifications, there were plenty of people who wanted to follow him. There were young and beautiful girls of similar age and experience. But he couldn't forget his wife, and he didn't want to upset his only daughter. Gu Xingyin looked at him and said sorry in her heart. In order to achieve her goal, she even brought up the mother of this body. But looking at his father's expression, there should be a chance. Sure enough, when Zhong Zhiping came back to his senses, he saw his daughter sitting beside him and looking at him. He thought of the beautiful memories he had with his wife when he was young and couldn't bear to refuse her. He sighed. Dad only has a few requirements. At the end of the term, your grades will improve. Don't let this matter occupy too much of your life. You are still young, and there are many wonderful things in life. Also, you have to protect yourself. Chapter 1104. After settling her father, Gu Xingyin went to school the next day without any pressure. The next day when she came to the classroom, as expected, all the students in the class intentionally or unintentionally looked at her. She ignored these gazes and sat down. Just as she took out her book, she saw her deskmate looking at her hesitantly. Gu Xingyin had a good impression of this deskmate. This girl's personality was the same as her appearance. They were both quite quiet. Although the two of them didn't talk much, their relationship wasn't bad. Most importantly, this girl wasn't like some people who avoided Zhong Zhanghuan, as if he was a demon or a ghost. She put the book on the desk and turned to look at her. If you have something to say, just say it. Her deskmate was shocked. Usually, Zhong Zhanghuan wouldn't pay attention to her at all. But she still asked honestly in a small voice. I heard that you confessed to Lindsay yesterday? She knew it was about this. Gu Xingyin didn't intend to hide it and nodded. Yes, I fell in love with him at first sight. The girl's eyes widened. She didn't expect her to say it so naturally. Under normal circumstances, when a girl was asked such a question, shouldn't she lower her head shyly and not say anything? However, she silently imagined Gu Xingyin lowering her head shyly and shivered. That scene seemed a little too beautiful. This kind of style was more suitable for her. She thought for a moment and looked at Gu Xingyin worriedly. You don't think too much. I heard that Lindsay's personality is like that. Many girls were rejected when they said goodbye to him. Was she comforting herself? Gu Xingyin's gaze warmed a little, and she smiled at her deskmate. Thank you for your concern. I don't mind. Seeing that she didn't seem to have suffered any blow, her deskmate was relieved. But Gu Xingyin's next sentence made her widen her eyes again. What's the big deal about rejecting him once? You just wait and see. I'll get him one day. Gu Xingyin said confidently. Her deskmate looked at her in surprise. So she didn't plan to give up at all? Gu Xingyin was dressed much more normally today. Her hair was combed neatly, which was rare for her. She wore high-waisted denim jeans, a white lace shirt, and 3 shiny silver earrings on her left ear. After taking a few more glances, the girl couldn't help but blush. Why didn't she realize that her deskmate was so handsome? When Gu Xingyin saw her expression, he understood what she was thinking. A mischievous idea arose in her heart. She quietly leaned over and asked, "What's wrong? You're blushing when you see me. Are you attracted by my handsomeness?" She deliberately lowered her voice when she said this, and the girl's face immediately turned red. However, she was an honest person and actually nodded with a red face. It was the first time she saw her deskmate dressed so simply and neatly. She was indeed a little stunned. Ha 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 ha. Gu Xingyin couldn't help but laugh. How could someone be so obedient? The students in the class all turned their heads to look at the two of them, curious about what had happened between the two of them. 2 rows away, Changru looked over, his hands tightly gripping his sleeves. Why? She could whisper intimately with that girl without any scruples and laugh out loud, but she didn't even look at him nicely. Chapter 1105. After the morning self-study session, Gu Xingyin sat lazily in her seat without moving. Changru walked over to her seat and said to Gu Xingyin's deskmate, "Cici, can you give us some space? I have something to talk to Zhang Huan about." Gu Xingyin's deskmate Cici knew that the two of them didn't get along. Although their relationship seemed to be improving, she was still a little worried. However, she had always been a soft person. At most, she glanced at Gu Xingyin worriedly before standing up obediently and leaving. Gu Xingyin raised her eyebrows and looked at Changru. "Class rep, do you have any instructions for me?" Changru looked at her face, which had instantly turned cold, and her tone was completely businesslike. Anger rose in her heart. She was clearly chatting and laughing with others just a moment ago. Why did she become like this the moment she arrived? Why didn't she think about her relationship with Zhong Zhanghuan in the past? She had inexplicably changed her opinion of Zhong Zhanghuan, but to Zhong Zhanghuan, Changru was still the same Changru he used to dislike. Suppose someone who was always at odds with you suddenly changed their temper and treated you well. What would a normal person's reaction be? Most people's first reaction would probably be that there was a conspiracy. But Changru took it for granted, or rather, she was too self-centered. She was very popular, and almost everyone liked her. So she naturally thought that since she liked Zhong Zhanghuan and treated her so well, it was only natural that Zhong Zhanghuan would like her back. But Zhong Zhanghuan didn't improve their relationship like she wanted, so she felt extremely wronged. So, Changru impulsively blurted out, "Zhong Zhanghuan, do you hate me?" Gu Xingyin seemed to be very surprised as he looked at her and asked in confusion, "Class rep, isn't it obvious that I hate you? I thought the whole class knew that we hated each other." Changru's face turned pale when she heard Gu Xingyin's blunt answer. The environment she grew up in and the education she received since she was a child had taught her to hold back when she spoke. This was the first time she had seen someone as impolite as Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin, on the other hand, felt refreshed. The original owner had a domineering and flamboyant personality. It was simply too awesome. When speaking to a cold person like Changru, one had to be simple and crude in order to be effective. Changru seemed to have been dealt a huge blow by Gu Xingyin's words. Her voice trembled as she asked, "I thought we could be friends." Gu Xingyin shuddered at his resentful tone. She resisted the urge and said, "Don't. I have not the slightest interest in being your friend. Class rep, if you really want what's best for me, let's go our separate ways in the future. What the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. That's for the best." Changru ran out crying. Gu Xingyin. Did she say something outrageous? His deskmate, Cici, walked over cautiously. She had been standing to the side, so she didn't hear what the two of them said. She only heard her deskmate say a few words, and then the class rep ran out crying. Did I say something outrageous? Before she could ask, Gu Xingyin asked first. Cici was dumbfounded. Gu Xingyin repeated the conversation between the two to Cici. After that, he asked the same question again. Cici thought for a moment and said uncertainly, "It should be a bit outrageous, right?" You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.